Welcome everyone to today's program, brought to you by Ambulatory Alliances. I am Robert Kurtz, moderator for the webinar. Today's program will begin with a roundtable discussion between our panelists, and then we'll have a question and answer session following completion of the roundtable. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. Our panelists will attempt to answer as many of your questions as they can during the Q&A portion of the program. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to inform you that today's program is the first in a four-part series focusing on selling an ambulatory surgery center. Part 1, this webinar, will address how to determine whether to sell your ASC and when to sell. The remaining 3 parts will cover how to prepare for a sale, how to effectively market an ASC, and how to negotiate the deal terms. You will receive information on how to register for the remaining programs in the series as registration information becomes available. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. We have Blayne Rush, President of Ambulatory Alliances. He is an SEC-registered and FINRA-licensed investment banker. He specializes in ASC brokerage, ASC turnarounds and increasing ASC valuations through physician recruitment and syndications, and access to the capital markets and capital structuring consulting for surgery, urgent care centers, and radiation oncology centers. We also have Curtis Bernstein, who is Managing Director for Sinaiko Healthcare Consulting. Mr. Bernstein specializes in providing valuation, transaction advisory, strategic and operational consulting services to clients. He has extensive experience working closely with hospital systems, physician groups, ambulatory surgery centers, and other healthcare providers. We will now begin the roundtable discussion. I'm going to direct the first question in the roundtable to Blayne to start. Blayne, what is the life cycle of an ASC?
Thanks, Rob. The life cycle of an ASC includes the startup, initial growth, the rapid growth, then the slowing growth, plateau, and then decline. The startup is the pre-development phase where you're trying to figure out what direction you want to go and how are you going to get there. For example, if you're a group of busy podiatrists, your case volume shows that the pro forma will be below break even. So do you go out and recruit, say, some orthopedic or spine guys to and go alone, or do you sell, quote unquote, at this point in time a piece of the project to an ASC management company or a health system, but we'll talk more about that later. Then you have the initial growth phase, which is a very important stage in your center's development towards profitability. This is when you set the tone. This is when you lay the foundation and the physician partners and utilizers have their first impression of the operations of the center. Additionally, you'll be able to address the surgical caseload commitments that you've based your pro forma on at this point in time as well. Profits will not be there until the fixed costs are covered. Thus, you should be focused on working with the physicians to capture the surgical volume that you put in your business plans performance. Also be working on operational efficiencies and containing costs. If your doctors are not aggressively shifting cases to your center, you need to address that in this stage as well. You need to be working towards break even as quickly as possible. That being said, you should also look to see if you need to be open every day or not, have minimal staffing, recruit more physicians that do cases in your center. I've seen some centers that are 4 to 5 years old and they're not out of this stage of development. Then you have the rapid growth or expansion growth stage. In this stage, you're covering the fixed costs, have worked out the operational inefficiencies, and working well with the surgeons. You're making consistent distributions, and your EBITDA is expanding with each additional case. You know, as we said before, many times before, once you're at break even, every dollar of revenue should add between 65 cents and 85 cents to the bottom line. And during this rapid growth phase is where the fun begins, and everything that you work towards is moving faster. Your hard work and strategic operations are paying off with results, and the profits are being driven by the core doctors. Then you have the next phase, which is slowing growth. Well, I've seen surgery centers that go from the initial growth stage to the slow growth stage, skipping the rapid growth stage. It's more likely to happen as you capture the majority of the surgical cases that the original partners, the ones that you started with, the ones that were the foundation of the surgery center, and the utilizers of the ASC have. So it's possible that slow growth happens at any time in the ASC growth cycle, but most likely, again, once you capture most of the surgical cases from the original physicians. This is when the growth slows down, the excitement's gone, the partnership matures, and partners begin to decrease the number of new cases, meaning, as they new cases they shift from other places or the hospital. The business best practices get overlooked, and cost containment is not looked after as closely as it should be. This very often happens when the team forgets about the fundamentals and thinks that the rapid growth is never going to slow down. Then the next stage is plateau. Obviously, at the plateau stage, your ASC, you're having challenges. Everything has stalled. You have an administrator with a good bit of complacency at best. Partners are disconnected, and the partnership starts to show signs of breakdown. Then the last stage is decline. Obviously, as the descriptive title shows, your center's at a state of decline. Partners are bringing cases other places. You have a tough time getting people to show up at meetings, and partners are disengaged, and that's the life cycle.
Thank you. Curtis, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, from the valuation side, we're going to talk about this more in a little bit. You see the little line here that shows, over time, how profits kind of go up and then start to decline a little bit as you move through the ASC life cycles. And, when we talk about multiples of valuation, you can kind of imagine that it's kind of the same trend there. You just take, 5 times your EBITDA, or 6 or 7 or 2 or 3, depending on the purpose of the sale, to determine the valuation. So this is a good slide because it indicates how your actual value of your business moves. Obviously not starting at the very bottom, because in the startup phase you need a certain amount of initial capital to fund the initial operations of the ASC. And then as you kind of go up, the value of that stock goes higher.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. Blayne, I'm going to ask you to start a discussion on this as well. Why would someone want to sell their ASC?
I guess we'll start and look at this answer as it pertains to each stage of the ambulatory surgery center cycle, and with the end game in mind, because you can sell at any point during the life cycle, as I kind of alluded to even in the startup phase. So it depends on what you want at the end of the day. Is your goal to build a center where you can have a significant liquidity event, or do you want to use the ASC as a profitable tool? So keep that in mind as we go through this process. But when I refer, at least whenever I refer to selling your ASC, I'm speaking to taking on investors that are not physicians. Thus, you are selling a good portion of your business or taking on non-physician investor partners. Common reasons for owners to sell include diversify assets, to reduce exposure to debt guarantees if the center is not performing well, to gain strategic benefits of some of the buyers, such as the hospital's ability to increase reimbursement or to recruit physicians, and some of the tax advantages for a liquidity event. That is, owners are taxed at a rate for capital gains today rather than the tax rate for their future income over time, which is higher rate. There are certainly a number of advantages to align with corporate partner, professional management, access to capital, greater focus on growth and realizing a return on your investment. But let's look at some of the reasons that you might want to sell in the startup phase. Remember, the startup is the pre-development phase where you're trying to figure it out. What direction do you want to go, or can go for that matter? And the main reason in my mind that you might want to bring on a corporate partner or a hospital health system during this stage is diversify your risk. From a pure financial perspective, it's much more financially beneficial for you to hire consultants to help you develop the center and someone, investment banker or whatever, to recruit the physicians and sell them shares in the company than to join with a corporate partner, again, from a pure financial standpoint. The reason is that when you build the business up, and once you have done all you can do with it and the growth is moderate, you can then sell for a multiple on the profits. Whereas in this stage, the corporate partner would pay the same as you do to get in the project, and then almost always require a management agreement, which they would take a percentage off the top. Now, there are some other reasons that you might want to join a partnership, such as better reimbursement of the surgery centers from non-governmental payers that the center could never have negotiated on. But a lot of startups, as everybody knows, startup ASCs, depending on the market, still go out of network and leverage that process to get good in-network contracts or access to startup capital with solid groups of docs to start. So it shouldn't be an issue as long as you have solid physicians and cases. And also one reason that you might is the development expertise, but then again, you can get that with consultants as well. Some reasons that you might want to sell during the initial growth phase. Again, the initial growth phase is when you set the tone, lay the foundation, the physician partners and utilizers have their first impression of the operations of the centers. Profits are not there until fixed costs are covered. Thus, you're working with the physicians to capture those surgical volumes that you put in your business plan. Like I said in the first question, I've seen some centers that are 4 to 5 years old not out of this stage of development. Depending on the reason that you're unable to get your fixed costs completely covered, you might think about selling this stage of the process. This is really not a good time to think about selling because you have taken on all the work and risk to get it up and going. But again, some people really need operational help and case recruitment help that a hospital health system or an ASC management company might provide. I've seen situations where selling a large share of your ASC to a large group of physicians and allowing them a significant leadership role in the business is beneficial to you if you're unable to get out of this stage. But again, theoretically, you could actually end up paying someone to take a position in your center at this stage. For example, if you're not at break even and you have significant debt, an investor will look at your center from the startup costs or asset valuation method, and Curtis can speak more to that later, but they would take on pro rata debt and require a management agreement where they take a percentage off the top line. So you're paying them before you for sure get paid. I also had an experience where an ASC had only a couple of high volume surgeons, and that relationship broke down and became very ugly in this stage of the development. And in this case, the other partner needed to be bought out and taken off the debt. Thus, you might not have an option but to sell to a deep pocket investor if that's the case or the situation that you find yourself in. Another reason might be if you find yourself without the expertise to get it through the stage, it's better to take on some operational expertise and sell a big piece than having to infuse a lot of your capital, a lot of money out of your pocket to cover the debt service. So again, if you have capital that you could invest in hiring a company, depending on the market, meaning you hire some consultants, it would be better financially speaking to do that compared to selling an equity position to a management company. Pure financial there. But while you might want to sell your ASC in a rapid growth or the expanding growth phase, like we discussed, during this expanded growth phase, it's where all the fun begins. Everything you work towards starts moving faster. Your strategic operations is paying off. And centers that obtain the highest sales prices are the ones that have strong, sustainable, and growing earnings. The multiples will decrease if there's a limited growth opportunity from existing partners or if there are few recruiting prospects, meaning new physicians that you can go recruit in the marketplace, or if there's capacity concerns. Does the physical space allow for expansion or added cases? The multiples will increase if your centers consists of partners with growing practices, if there's enough recruitable surgeons, and the physical capacity to add cases is there. And they look at two types of growth, internal, external. Internal growth would be cases from the existing physician partners. We've been in situations we'll go in and evaluate what's happening, and there's a significant amount of cases that the current physician investors are not bringing to the center, and that can, and with a little bit of tweak here and there, we can capture those. And then external, which obviously is going out to recruit physicians out in the marketplace, bring them in, they do cases, and eventually they invest. Some of the reasons that you might want to sell during this phase, liquidity event, the distributions like we made mention earlier that you're receiving are taxed as ordinary income, whereas the sales proceeds are more than likely would be taxed as capital gains. You'll receive the present value of future cash flows. In other words, you get a big chunk of change in your pocket, which is really conditioned upon the future cash flows. You can decrease your liability or risk to those future cash flows. We never know what's going to happen, what laws are going to be changed, what reimbursement rates are going to be changed. I think, as Curtis will tell you, that all those things go in. That risk goes into the formulas, but we really don't know at the end of the day. And if you sell towards the end of this stage or the beginning of the slowing growth phase, as long as there's moderate growth and some other factors, like we spoke about before, you're likely to attain the highest sales price, but you could, with some help, expand this stage and work to increase your earnings. We'll speak more about that in a little bit. You can obtain management business expertise from some of the strategic buyers. If physicians are tired of managing the place, some are just wore out and want their life back, if you will, so they want to sell. If you get with a corporate partner, they're focused on future growth and bringing in new surgeons. You're focused on being a physician and a doctor and doing your clinical work. They also have leverage with suppliers, et cetera. So you could bring down your cost and whatnot, and they have a lot of matrix and all those management type tools. So it really depends on a whole host of items. But if you do sell in this stage, you want to sell towards the top of this stage where the profits are close to peaking, or as we'll speak more in a couple of seconds, at the beginning of the next stage where there's still moderate growth. But I'd also stress that if you have the physical space capabilities, it's a great time to look at your best practices, payer contracts, and execute a strategic resyndication plan so you can expand this rapid growth cycle and capture that increase in profit when you sell or if you choose to sell. Moving to the slow growth phase, again, this is when the growth slows down. The initial excitement is gone, the partnerships are maturing, they're slowing down on the number of new cases that they add. Sometimes things are taken for granted. Business best practices are overlooked. But a lot of the reasons that you would want to sell in this phase are the same as you would want to sell in the rapid growth phase. Liquidity event, present value, future cash flows, decrease your liability or risk to the future cash flows, all that type of stuff. But again, I'd state that as long as there's moderate growth, you should do well with the sales price. That should be best suited to sell in the early stages of the slowing growth cycle if you're selling this cycle. Again, if you have the physical space and capabilities, this is when you need to look at your best practice payer contracts, tweak those, recruit the physicians, see if you can expand that stage. Let's talk about the plateau stage. At the plateau stage, your ASC, you're having challenges, things have stalled. More than likely, you have an administrator with good bit of complacency as best. Partners are disconnected. They're showing signs of breakdown. And if you don't address these challenges, you'll quickly move to the next stage, which is the stage of decline. And the reason that you'd want to sell in plateau stage and decline are very similar. physicians owners are burned out by now. They were never able to get the center to perform up to expectations, and you need help with business best practices, payer contracts, physician resyndication, and management of the surgeons. And oftentimes you'll need a change in leadership, reallocation of ownership, need to redeem the non-producing partners or the underperforming partners. You really need a good turnaround specialist at this point because you missed the value capture that you really wanted. And sometimes the best exit strategy at this stage of the game is to wait and hold the center. If you can get new owners and whatnot committed, working to maintain a high clinical standard, bring in some new utilizers and procedures, work on improving payer contracts, cut expenses, most of the time you can achieve and expand the growth. So you can go back to the slow growth into the rapid growth.
Thank you, Blayne. Curtis, you have anything to add?
Yeah, that was actually a pretty detailed description here. I think that was really, really good. A couple minor things to add. For example, in the startup phase, I've seen it where not all the physicians will buy into the surgery center at the get-go. They want to make sure that other people are really interested and the project's going to move forward. So, we've seen need for sale to other physicians in that area. Then, with regard to the actual purchase price, and it's something like I think Blayne mentioned, and I'll mention we'll talk about that a little bit here. You need to kind of maintain and understand what's happening to the purchase price to buy into the center over time. I've seen some pretty large ASCs that have pretty significant buy-in prices as they kind of move through that rapid growth phase, and that leads to the physicians not wanting to buy into this specific center because they feel that it's too high, the price is too high for them to buy in. So, you need to consider that also on the physician side, and then obviously as you're moving up the scale there, and if the physicians are looking to retire, certain physicians are looking to retire and buy out and have a liquidity event, then you look at management companies buying in. So, like I said, I think Blayne did a good job here, but you just need to continue to monitor that price and make sure it's not cost prohibitive for your doctors to buy in over time as well. Always something to consider.
Thank you, Curtis. Blayne, next question back to you. You already sort of started touching on this a bit, but how would someone know when it's time for them to consider selling their ASC?
Great question. As we've previously mentioned, you want to consider selling your ASC when an outside investor can add the most value to the partnership and right as you're peaking with what you can do with the center. Sometimes that's different for different people. There's buyers and sellers again for each stage of this ASC life cycle. It's tough to anticipate a future decline in business, so it's necessary to determine where the surgery center business is and where it's heading. Easy, right? Not so. I'd recommend that owners think of their ownership shares in their surgery center as you would shares in any other company, Nike, Facebook, GE, etc., because the values can go up or down at almost any time. But let's look at a thought process, or the thought process, in a more strategic fashion. What we would do if we were brought in early enough in the decision-making process, we would recommend doing a SWOT analysis. There are others that you could use to get to the same place, but it's the one that most of us, we all heard about it, and it's fairly easy and straightforward, so it's the one that we use. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The analysis guides you to identify the positives and negatives inside your ambulatory surgery center business. That is the S and W. And outside of it, the external environment, and that's the O and T. This will help you to develop a full awareness of your situation, which can help you create a plan and making the decision, do you hold it, do you sell it, and what is your path forward if you sell it or you hold it. You can list, as I think there's a slide somewhere, but you can list the internal and external opposites side by side, answer these simple questions. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your physician group, your ASC, your market, your efforts or actions, and what are the opportunities and threats facing it? You know, typically speaking, some of the strengths of a surgery center: young, engaged partners, multi-specialty case mix, well-paying long-term contracts. Some of the weaknesses, we all know them: low volume, high debt, disengaged partners, low-paying contracts, and overbuilt centers. Some people go in there and build the Taj Mahal, and I would argue that you get a plain ASC that has a excellent physician and case load recruiting strategy that they execute well, will do much better than the Taj Mahal Surgery Center. Some of the opportunities that we see out there: ability to take on more cases or expand, improve payer contracts. You had an ASC that I sold a month or so ago that had payer contracts at 100% of Medicare. So those are non-government contracts that were 100% of Medicare. This was a huge buying point for the strategic buyer because it was an easy opportunity to increase the revenue shortly after they bought the center. I mean, they knew that as soon as they bought the center that they could increase those contracts and get a return on their money. Recruitable surgeons in the market, lower expense, improve business best practices, you know, turn over the surgery center, and all those types of things that physicians really appreciate. Internal cases that can be brought to the center, we mentioned that before. And, you know, another thing to think about is able to establish a direct-to-patient marketing program. Threats are typically the competition. So competing hospitals, in-office procedure rooms, competing ASCs. This isn't necessarily competition, but fractured partnerships and disgruntled partners. So that's what we would suggest, and the process that we would suggest you guys go through to get a better understanding of kind of when that best time for you guys to exit is.
Thank you. Curtis?
That was pretty well done there by Blayne. I think you covered it all.
Excellent. Well, let's stick with you to start a discussion on the next question. What are the factors affecting the valuation of an ASC in each period of the life cycle?
Okay. Well, if you want to just scroll back to the life cycle slide real quick, we can just walk through each section. So starting with the startup, you know, there really isn't much affecting the valuation. It's really just what's the underlying cost to develop the center. So that'll include your fixed costs, such as purchasing the equipment, your beginning working capital you need before you're actually up and running. So you're going to have to hire some nurses, some administrative staff, your management staff. You're probably going to have to put out some money for some supply inventory. You're going to need some consultants to work on filing your Medicare paperwork and your other payer paperwork, and credentialed with your payers. So there's a number of different costs that go in there. You just want to make sure that's all covered. So when you take that number, you divide it by the number of shareholders, you get the appropriate amount that needs to be put in from the beginning to start up that surgery center. And then, as I mentioned before, if you have certain physicians that have an interest in buying into the center, but did not actually put in money at that very beginning phase, then, you know, chances are you probably had them just enter at the same amount. And we commonly see shares going from 15,000, 25,000, maybe 30,000 per unit. And that really just depends on how many people are buying in, how many shares you have. You know, commonly you'll see 100 shares being offered, and some doctors will buy 5, some will buy 10. And it'll vary by doctor. Once you get into that initial growth phase, you know, you've got your Medicare certification, you've got your you're credentialed with your different payers and you start to do your procedures, that's when the actual potential of the center comes into account. So we're going to look at how many doctors you actually have involved, what are their ability to perform cases in the center now that they're locked in, how many cases we project them to actually do. Do you have the capacity to do all those cases? What is the mix? What is the projected future reimbursement for those types of cases? Obviously, there's been a lot of change in Medicare over the last few years or so, and that's now all phased in. So we don't really have to worry about that anymore. But we're looking at what are some of the changes now with regard to value-based purchasing. What is the quality of care, and how is that quality being performed within your center, and how is that going to overall affect your future reimbursement from Medicare, and how are other payers within your market going? In some markets we're seeing some payers go to a capitated model with a risk pool and risk scoring. So while that may not be in the ASC space, it is something we are seeing. We also need to consider hospital purchases of physician practices, what's going on in each of the markets, and how that affects the overall projected growth within the center. And once you have that center fully syndicated, it starts going up into that rapid growth. We're going to look at a projection on over that time into the slow growth and plateau. And like I said before, that profit line there kind of shows what happens to the value over time. At startup, the value might actually, once you get into that initial growth phase, the value may actually go down. I said 15 to 30,000, let's say, for the initial purchase. That actually may go down because all that money is spent, and until you actually are up and running, all you have is costs and liabilities. So you may actually see the value shrink a little and then kind of come back up and follow this arc up. And then we're going to look at multiples of EBITDA. If it's minority interest, 2 to 3.5, and if it's a controlling interest, 5 to 7 of that line, the less debt. And then, depending on how much debt you have, may adjust that too. So if you have two of the same centers and they have the same exact profitability, and they have the same capacity, same physician mix and whatnot, then and Center A has significantly more debt than Center B, well, Center A for the stock is going to be worth a little less. So following that line, we that's kind of consistent with how we're going to look at value. If you add more doctors, and you see that red dotted line there, what's going to happen is the value is going to go up because you're going to do more cases, you're going to have more profit. More profit generates more value to the center.
Thank you, Curtis. Blayne, do you have anything to add?
No, I think he covered most of it. I don't think I could add anything.
Okay. Curtis, we're going to come back to you for the next question, the second to last one we're going to be tackling for the roundtable. How would someone identify the ideal time to sell their ASC?
And I think this goes back to a lot of what Blayne said. It really depends a lot on your motivation and who you're selling to. And in my mind, obviously, if you're starting your ASC, and let's say you have 5 physicians that have bought in, and you have 10 potential physicians within the market that you think should have bought in, so you have 5 left, you want to try to get them in there as soon as possible, because at the end of the day, you want to keep that price low, because that's when the physicians are going to want to get in. They're not going to want to get in once the value of that interest becomes cost prohibitive to them. If it gets up to 100,000 or 500,000 or whatever, it gets up to, because I've seen some get up pretty high. You want them in obviously from the very beginning, because that'll take you out to the growth phase, and through that initial growth phase to the rapid growth phase a lot quicker. You probably skip that initial growth phase really, other than just having the opening and getting the doctors in there. If as new doctors come into the market, you want them to buy in right away, and that'll drive up the value. And then when you're looking to take money off the table and you look to sell to a management company, obviously you want to grow when that profit has been maximized, because that's when you're going to get the most money out of this thing as a seller. You know, those multiples are going to stay the same whether you're making $200,000 profit, $500,000 profit, or $1 million in profit. And that's, you know, it's pretty simple math to understand how that affects the value, because if you're taking 5 times that, obviously once you hit that $1 million in profit, then you've hit you've kind of hit that home run. I think some of the management companies are also looking for growth though. So, you know, they're going to pay a little bit of a higher multiple. You know, we talk about that 5 to 7 or 8 times EBITDA. They're going to pay at the upper end of that multiple when you still have some capacity for growth. And you can prove that to them that there's the ability to grow, because they're going to look at same-store sales. You know, they're trying to prove, one, they're going to make an investment, they're going to get all this profit, but then they're trying to prove that they bought this ASC and it's going to continue to generate more profit for them. And then there's a few ways you can do that. One is obviously increase in reimbursement. 2 is decrease in expense. And 3 is increase in number of cases that are being performed in the center. So if you have that extra capacity there, but you've locked up a lot of doctors and you've grown it enough so you have a significant profit, and you can still prove that there's capacity and people in the market that are willing to buy in, that's when you're going to maximize your value there.
Thank you, Curtis. Blayne, anything to add?
Yeah, I got a couple of things and expand, then a couple of expansions on what Curtis said. But you know, since we know that your ASC is worth the most when you still have moderate growth, like Curtis just said. So at the top of the expanding growth stage, or at the beginning of the slowing growth stage, if the market has recruitable surgeons and your center can take on more cases, or has excess capacity, regardless if you have to expand your day, you know, start surgery at 6 a.m. and end them at 6 p.m., do cases on weekends by expanding your week, et cetera, you still have capacity. And we'll assume for a second that for this question that you desire to maximize value in terms to you and your partners, and to take on a partner that will be a good fit and increase its profits. So assuming all that, it's pretty straightforward and easy thought process. The tough part is, when will we know all of this? What we would suggest and what we would do is we'd go through this process with a very specific client. We would conduct in-depth interviews to get a better understanding of what everybody wants and what they're willing to commit to in order to get there, as well as do due diligence of the center. You know, hey, what does your contracts look like? To look at all your business best practices, and we would then lead them through that SWOT analysis that we spoke about, because that's going to really help you understand what paths you have and what paths you have the discussion around those. Your weakness and opportunities, in addition to what you're willing to commit to, is really what determines the answer to the question. You know, what is the ideal time to sell my ASC? You'll then determine from that process if you have the desire to execute on some of the strategies that will take advantage of some of the opportunities that you have identified in order to expand the rapid growth cycle and the slow growth cycle. And that's where that dotted line comes in on that one slide. Because if you do a lot of those things, you're going to expand that up. And obviously, like Curtis alluded to, that's your profits in the value of their surgery center. Because these buyers want to know that they have some of that left. But what I would tell you is that you want to capture the majority of that difference prior to selling, if you are willing to commit to going through that process. And in the event that you're unwilling or unable to expand the rapid growth cycle, you know, and there's people that will help you out there, but say that you're not willing to, then that's the point in time that you need to sell. But if not, I would tell you that, hey, you need to, if you're willing to commit to that process, that you need to execute that process prior to sale, and then sell, after the new cases seasons a little while.
Excellent. Thank you, Blayne. Let's move into the final question. Blayne, I'm going to stick with you to start our discussion. On the other side of things, as opposed to ideal, is there a bad time for someone to consider selling their ASC?
Yes, and we've been through that a few times with clients. Of course, there's less optimal times to sell your ASC. We mentioned some of them while we're answering some of the other questions, but from a financial sense, if you're still growing rapidly, recruiting new physicians, or have the market that would allow, with some help, that growth, then it's in your best financial interest to capture that growth before you sell. So that's not a good time to sell. In other words, you really do not, regardless of what stage your ASC is in, to sell before the timing is right. That's easy, right? The challenge is the variables that are out there. They're unknown. All the variables that we talked about before, you need a crystal ball to really understand those. So it's no different than making a surgical decision. You have to look at the situation in its entirety, analyze your ASC, do the SWOT analysis, look at yours and the market strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, then look at and pay close attention to your weaknesses. I have a few examples of situations that we've been in that was bad time to sell. One in particular, we had been speaking with this group. We had started the conversation probably 9 months before we got engaged, but they waited a significant amount of time before they finally engaged us to go sell it. And they went from the plateau to the decline stage, and they had no option. They were out of money. And so it really comes down to time in that situation. If we would have got in during the plateau stage when we first started having those conversations, it's possible that we could have helped save them. But they were forced to sell whenever the center was in decline, and we sold their CON and their assets. So essentially it was an asset sale because they really had very little to no profits. So that's a bad time to sell when you're forced to. I guess the theme of the answer to the question, is there a bad time to sell, it's when you wait until you have no other options but to sell, or when you're forced to sell. If you're not a realist and are not able to realistically look at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and understand that you have some weaknesses, or your market does, you need help shoring up those weaknesses. Because some people will say, oh, we don't have a weakness, it's this or that. And really, that's not realistic. You got to look at yourself as well whenever you go through the process. So unless you make changes, in those plateau and decline stages, it's tough because you've missed the boat at that point in time. So if buyers do not add value, then it's less optimal time to sell as well. And timing is a big key, because if you're not profitable, then you're selling your used assets.
Thank you, Blayne. Any additional comments from you, Curtis?
Yeah, I agree completely with Blayne. It's the same ASC space or any other type of business we see. You definitely don't want to sell when you have to sell, because you're not going to obviously maximize your value in that case. There's different, from the valuation perspective, there's different levels of value. There's orderly liquidation, which is you take your time to sell, and then we have liquidation in distress, and we have other types of liquidation where and even from the valuation theory perspective, if you don't have the actual time to keep it on the market, the value is going to be a lot lower. You're not going to get all the value. You're not going to maximize the value during the sale. So you need to look through that life cycle. Like Blayne said, you need to look at your opportunities and your weaknesses, and you need to be careful that you don't get to a point where your profits are declining, or toward the end of your largest producers of surgical cases, toward the end of their career, and there's no backup or or there's no plan to re-syndicate or anything like that, because at the end of the day, you're not going to maximize your value.
Oh, terrific. Thank you, Curtis, and certainly thank you, Blayne,
Rob.
as well. Yes.
Rob, I want to go back. I had a thought
Sure.
that I missed, but going back to the question, how to identify the ideal time to sell my ASC. So you go through all that strategic process that we spoke about, and also it depends on what offers that you get. So how much someone offers you is also what you're going to, and who makes those offers. So essentially, you might have to go to market and go out there and test the waters. Now, there's some risk with that, but and I'll make mention of those, but you go to market and present your center to multiple buyer types, same point in time, same life cycle in time, if you will, to see what the buyers are willing to pay, and also to find out who those buyers are. Can they add value and take you to the, expand that growth rate, because that's obviously very important. And the risk associated with that is that, so say that we go to market. A lot of people ask this, or they think that there's no risk associated with it, but there is. So say we took you to market and we went and covered the entire market, however we end up defining that. And we go through the process, negotiate with all these different buyers, come up with some sales price, and then the group says, I don't want to sell right now, which is your option. So in all these process, you have that option to say, nope, don't want to do it. And then you'll know that it's not an ideal time for you to sell. But you're going to have to take some time and change some things or whatnot before you go to the market again, because the market's going to say, I don't want to deal with those guys because they're not serious, et cetera. So that's a small risk, but that's probably the only risk that you really have. If you look at your do this strategic analysis, the SWOT process, and then go market your center to figure out who the buyers are and what they can bring to you, you can always say no. And so you'll know at the end of all of that process if it's an ideal time to sell or not.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Let's get into the Q&A portion. We've got time to take a few questions, but I certainly want to encourage all the attendees, if we don't get to your question, you have an additional question, I can certainly encourage you to contact Blayne and Curtis directly. Their contact information is on this final slide here. You can also respond to any of the emails that you received about the program with questions, feedback, requests for future topics, etc., and they will certainly come to us, and we'll do our best to address, again, any questions or requests that you have. As a reminder, if you'd like to submit a question, you already have a few in the queue, but please send along any questions you have. You can do so by typing them into your control panel in a space labeled Enter Question for Staff and click Send. So we'll get into a few questions, and I'm going to ask Blayne and Curtis to share some final thoughts. First question, Blayne, directed at you. You refer to pricing a lot, but also mention a buyer adding value. What would you advise an ASC to look for in a buyer?
Good question. It depends on what your needs are. So once you go through that process that we spoke about, the SWOT analysis, and you identify, hey, these are our opportunities, these are our issues, et cetera, our threats, they need to be able to shore those up for you. It's like anything else. One partner is there to take care of the other partner's weaknesses and vice versa. So I would say that why pricing is very important, and pricing is one of the top 1, 2, 3 things that you want to look at when you go to sell. It's, hey, can I get along with these guys? Do we connect? Do we mesh? And can those guys take us to the next level, if you will, or can they expand our rapid growth phase here and increase our profits? So it really looks at, hey, here's what we need, and can these guys deliver on what we need? And it's dependent upon each specific surgery center.
Thank you, Blayne. Even though I was directed at you, Curtis, do you have any additional thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess it just really depends on the process that you're in and what you're looking for. I mean, if you're looking out for positions, obviously you want to add positions that are in the same specialty that are already in the center, so you don't have to add additional costs like equipment or any build out to the space. And then, you know, once you go out and you're looking to sell out to, let's say, a management company or a hospital, you need to understand the benefits there as well. If you want someone to manage the center, different buyers will look to buy different percents. There are some buyers out there that are willing to take a little bit less of a percent, and it really just depends on how much control you want to give up of your center. You know, if you're selling 51%, in general, that gives the new owner the ability to do what they want, and you don't have as much say. Whereas if you sell a 30% interest, you might have a little bit more control in the long run on what happens with your center. All stuff that really needs to be considered and stuff I think Blayne helps people, you know, work out in these types of transactions.
Thank you. Curtis, I think I'm going to, I'll direct this next question to you, at least to start the discussion. What strategies, this attendee wants to know, what strategies can they implement during the growth and plateau phases of the life cycle if the value of the shares in their ASC is too high, if they're preventative of physicians wanting to buy into the center?
So obviously when we talk about valuation, it comes down to cash flow. And as I mentioned, we're generally looking at, it's pretty simple, it's, you know, it's cash flow time, or EBITDA times a multiple less debt. And to, you know, to decrease that, you've got a couple of things you might try. Obviously the biggest is on the debt side. You can take on more debt and then distribute out that cash flow to the prior owners, and that would bring down that cash flow. You know, other things you can do is try to add, you know, do new capital improvements sooner than later. If you're in need of new equipment or in need of leasehold improvements to your ASC, those are all things you can do to help decrease the cash flow, implement a new EMR system. Anything to kind of bring down that EBITDA before the sale, and create some, you know, short-term decrease in your earnings will bring down the value short-term and allow physicians to buy in, and then obviously that'll ramp back up with their case volume because you're helping cover the costs with that reimbursement.
Thank you, Curtis. Blayne, anything to add?
No, I think that's you know, that he covered it well.
Excellent. Let's take a couple more questions, and then again I'll ask Blayne and Curtis share some final thoughts. Might be a word missing in this question. I'll try and see if I can read it quickly. Blayne, I think I can directly direct it at you. You mentioned hiring a firm like yours to help expand the stage. I'm thinking probably the growth stages. This person understands that everyone, you know, all of you, two of you, you all sell surgery centers, but what would you actually do to help this attendee, this ASC, expand that stage?
What we do is so everything we do is driven towards the sales process, but also towards maximize the value capture that the sellers get from that sales process. So we'll go in and do those analysis that we spoke about, and then we'll execute the physician recruitment, physician syndication process. We'll make suggestions on the expense side. You know, we have operational guys that we bring in if we need that, but we'll go in and interview them, find out what their exit strategy is, and do the due diligence, and or I say exit strategy, what their desire is in an exit, and we'll go and execute that, and then go sell the surgery center.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's go into one last question, sort of related to that, but also a little bit different. Blayne, how have you started the discussion? This final question, if an ASC is struggling to get out of the initial growth stage, what recommendations can you provide?
Well, it obviously depends on the ASC, in their marketplace, I would suggest that they look at what they're doing, and a lot of the things, meaning, hey, what are you doing and what should you be doing, and then make some changes there. But some of the things that we see with surgery centers that are in that initial phase is their debt. I mean, a lot of these guys end up with a significant amount of debt, and they're unable to recruit the physicians because, or even sometimes you can't even recruit a corporate partner because they're unwilling to take on some of that debt. So that's a big issue because you have that debt coverage, and therefore, like Curtis was talking about the valuation process, it's minus debt. So if you have more debt than income, you're at a negative, so you're worth less than zero. But restructure that debt. I know one ASC that we're working with right now is they had a shorter-term loan. It was 7 years. In a perfect world, it wouldn't be good what we did with them, but it was good for them because we pushed that debt out 15 years. We did our debt recap and pushed it out 15 years, and we dropped $20,000 to their profit line every month. And so to try to restructure that debt and go look at what your options are on that. And so that's one big thing. The other is to try to negotiate better contracts. The same situation. They had some of their third-party contracts were expiring in like 18 months, and we showed them what some of the other surgery centers in the area were charging out of network, which they already knew, and said, hey, we're going out of network as soon as we can if we can't get this negotiated. So we negotiated about a 28% bump to sign a much longer contract. And then it comes down to, hey, are you taking care of those physicians? Because those guys are really, at the end of the day, your eyes and ears in the marketplace to find out who are the other physicians that you could recruit, and they're your cheerleaders in the marketplace. So you got to find out if they're happy or not, because a lot of times they're not going to proactively tell you. You got to go ask them, hey, what are we doing or not doing that would make it easy for you to bring more cases or all your cases, and visit with their schedulers and their office staff, because it's all about expense and revenue. Especially the early on. So you got to figure out everything that you can do to save a buck here and there, because those dollars add up to 20 grand. And that was just one of the big things that we did to add. We probably got $30-something thousand dropped every month to that center's bottom line. I mean, our exit strategy is to sell the thing in a couple of years, but that's what we went in and did. So, if they have a question, they can call us, but because it's really site-specific, but that's what we did in this situation.
Thank you. Curtis, anything to add that you've seen work in this stage?
No, I think Blayne covered it pretty well.
Oh, excellent. Again, before I give Blayne and Curtis an opportunity to share some final thoughts, I certainly want to again encourage all of our participants today to reach out to Blayne and Curtis directly using their contact information on the slide here, or you can reply to any of the emails you've received about the program, and certainly hope that you will join us for the remaining 3 parts in this series. The next part will cover how to prepare for a sale, and you'll receive information on that program when the registration information is available. Curtis, can you give you a chance to share some final thoughts before we conclude today's program?
Sure, Rob. I think just in summary from the program, I think it makes sense that everyone who owns a surgery center just to continue to monitor where they are in their life cycle and understand how that affects the overall value, and remember what your strategies are if you want to add positions or sell out and take money off the table. It's always good to assess your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then reach out if you ever have a question as far as where you're at or what your goals should be, and we'd be more than happy to help.
Thank you, Curtis. Blayne, some final thoughts from you?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway that I would encourage people to take away is don't wait too long, because I've gotten many phone calls from people that once you look at and evaluate doing a cursory evaluation of the situation, they waited too long. for help or whatnot. So, even if you're in the rapid growth stage heading to the slowing growth, you can't wait till you're knocking on the plateau stage if you want to maximize your value capture and maximize the partner that you end up with. So it doesn't matter. So I'm not talking about, hey, if you're struggling or you're declining or you can't cover your debt service. I'm talking about any stages here that you need to monitor that, like he was saying, and need to make a decision and take action at the right time. It's all about timing.
Thank you, Blayne, and so certainly thank you, Curtis, both of you for a terrific roundtable, as well as taking the time to address a number of questions. Certainly want to thank all of the attendees, all of today's participants, for taking the time to join us. And with that, this concludes today's program. I wish everyone a great afternoon and a happy and healthy, enjoyable holiday weekend. So thank you again, and this concludes the program.